After galloping across the Hyrule Plain all afternoon, night was beginning to fall as Link neared the edge of the wood that he exited 7 years prior. "That was an incredible feat you pulled back at Lon Lon Ranch, Link." Navi had been quiet for very long. "Not as incredible as the feats I'm about to attempt." "You'll be fine. The way you rode the track, that was skillful." "That was luck," he retorted. "I'm going to need plenty of it to complete the tasks that lie ahead." They were ascending the ridge that currently hid the edge of the forest out of view. It was the ridge from which Link saw the Kingdom of Hyrule for the first time. He halted Epona at the top so he could look around. The vast landscape was unchanged. From afar, this was apparent, but the life within it had undoubtedly changed. The prairie losing its lush greenery was evidence of this, even focusing on the edifices of Castletown in the distance. The dull colors hinted at the ruin they suffered. Meanwhile, the sun was setting over the Gerudo Hills, the home of the usurper looming over this land. Link suddenly heard a familiar sound, a rustling sound he once heard at the moment of dusk. Down the hill, he spotted white bony figures digging their way out of the ground. "Zal children!" Navi alerted. The magical undead beings seemed to come out right at sundown. That time in the Death Mountain Pass, there was a relentless herd, but burrowing out of the ground below the hill, there were hosts of them. More and more sprung up, surrounding the ridge where they stood. By now, there was a small army of them, advancing up the hill. Epona grew restless with the foes closing in. "Do something, Link," Navi pleaded. Link whipped the reins. Epona ran down the hill towards the forest. Link unsheathed the Master Sword, preparing to clash with the front line of adversaries. Swinging it like a mallet, he cleared a path for them to ride through, past the undead skeletons, kicking up clouds of magical ash. They were able to take shelter in the woods. They traveled along, edging closer to Link's home. When they reached the chasm with the old rope-suspended bridge, the one that defined the border of the Kokiri territory, he paused. The memory of bidding farewell to Saria overwhelmed him, making him long for the days of being a carefree Kokiri kid, spending time with his childhood friend, whom was now allegedly a sage needing awakening. She said she was waiting for him in the forest temple. Link just needed to find where that was. After such time had passed during his state of suspension in the sacred realm, Link prepared himself to see his childhood peers, in the mystical Kokiri forest where they roamed, in a village of tree houses where they lived. Instead, Link found the village covered in overgrown vines and shrubs, amongst which were a disarray of gigantic Skulltula spiders and chomping Deku Baba plants, according to Navi. As Link rode up to investigate, one of the shrubs came to life, revealing itself as a hostile Deku scrub, like the one inside the Deku tree. More sprouted from the other shrubs, as they were alerted by their comrade. Pellets flying, Link dashed out of there on Epona, heading off into the deep, thick forested area known to the Kokiri as the Lost Woods. "Navi, what happened to the forest?" Link implored. "With the great Deku tree having perished," she responded, "there's nothing stopping these invasive species from growing in the forest he once protected." "Then what do you think became of the Kokiri?" Navi hesitated. "All we can do now is find the forest temple and seek the power of its sage. It's got to be hidden somewhere here in the Lost Woods." By now, a full moon had risen in the night sky. Staring up at it, Link sighed a deep breath, and began wandering the Lost Woods on horseback, in search of the legendary temple. As he went, Link recounted the legend of the temples he heard from Sheik. 5 of them, 3 of which in territories Link had been, 1 of which in his own backyard. This Sage of Forest was supposedly Saria. Then there was the matter of the 7th Sage. If Rauru was the 6th after the 5 from the temples, then who was the 7th? "Halt!" Link's thoughts were interrupted by the voice of a stocky ginger child with a yellow fairy flapping about him. This boy was none other than Mido. "Who do you think you are, mister?" He tried to intimidate Link, boasting the same puffy cheek complexion as he did all those years ago. Only now, Link was but a young man, sitting high up on a horse. "That Kokiri-like clothing won't fool me." Mido did not seem to recognize him. Link fully took in the situation as he dismounted Epona. Link was standing before a person who was once contemporary in his age, but now stood younger than him. Mido hadn't changed a bit in the 7 years that passed, which didn't surprise Link, as the Kokiri never grew up to be adults, unlike he had. Link could not conjure any words. He couldn't stop staring perplexedly into Mido's little face as he slowly approached the red-haired kid. "Don't come any closer, mister," Mido commanded. "I promised Saria I would never let anyone go through here." "Saria," Link whispered, as a wave of regretful nostalgia rode over him. "You don't know Saria," Mido stated, losing confidence. "She would never be friends with a grown-up like you." "Mido, it's me, Link." Link removed his cap, revealing Navi, who fluttered over to Mido's fairy. Mido could begin to see it now, but was still in disbelief. "No, Link is a Kokiri like me. We never grow up." "It's a long story of what happened to me after I left," Link explained. "But I did grow up." Mido didn't seem swayed. Link thought of something he still had in his knapsack. He dug into it, pulling out a light yellow clay ocarina. "That's..." A rare tear appeared in Mido's eye. Even to Link it seemed like forever since he laid hands on it, being thrown into the chaos of Ganondorf's plot and away from his childhood. Overcome with memories from those days, he put the mouthpiece to his lips and played the tune Saria had taught him. That melody... Mido's tear was now dripping down his puffy cheek. "Link?" "She gave it to me before I left." Link paused while they both admired it. "You said she instructed you not to let anyone through?" Saria must have heard something calling to her from the temple. If she knew somehow that she was being awoken, as she knew she was, then she definitely would have wanted absolutely nobody coming through to a place sacred enough to house a sage. Mido's mouth hung open. "Nobody except you, Link." Link suddenly knew exactly where she went. He remounted Epona and grabbed the reins with purpose. Mido stepped aside, and then gave Link something he never saw from him, a smile. Link looked at the stocky ginger-haired kid who once bullied him for being different. He smiled back. Whatever petty differences they had did not matter now. There grew a hazy fog as he proceeded through the thick woods. The penetration of the moonlight became weaker as Link went deeper. Meanwhile, the luminescence of the tiny airborne creatures twinkled more prominently, scattering in the fog and giving the eerie glow Link remembered. He also remembered the path Saria taught him, the one he learned with the song she would use to lead him when he was lost, the one he had just played for Mido. But he was not lost this time, no. He could remember the place they would go to spend time together, a grove with a small meadow, isolated in the lush flora. The place was peaceful, just like it was when they would visit as children, or at least it seemed that way. When Link climbed down off Epona, a large canine creature emerged in ambush from the brush. The creature was known as a Wolfos, but Link didn't need Navi to know that. It stood tall and intimidating as it snarled, threatening to slash from its hind legs. Link retaliated with a single devastating blow from the Master Sword, rendering it defeated as it howled in agony, limping off into the brush. As one of the perils of the Lost Woods, these creatures would lurk about, mostly preying on smaller animals, but Link had never had one come at him before. Just beyond the small meadow, a labyrinth stood, the same one he and Saria would explore. The tall stone walls lining the maze seemed ancient to Link, especially as a child. Moss and ivy engulfed them, giving them a characteristic green hue against the blackened mortar. As Link was turning the first corner, Navi flipped about, bumping into his chest in warning. "Look!" "What?" Link asked as he stumbled backwards. Peeking around the corner, he saw the cause for her alarm. A broad giant paced down the corridor, wielding a 10-foot spear like a short staff. The oafish figure itself was at least 10 feet tall as well, with a bulky muscular build and brown leathery hide for skin. Its scrunched-up hideous face resembled that of a wild boar, with long underbiting fangs and a wet snout, through which a booming snorting grunt was let out as it sniffed for intruders. As it got closer, Link ducked completely out of sight. The monster was clad in spiked shoulder pads, a chainmail tunic, and leather boots. Not much, but enough to dissuade Link from fighting it. So as it passed by, Link slid further away to avoid being sniffed out. Holding his breath, he could see its eyes were bloodshot with orangish pupils, and clearly too blind to see anything out of the ordinary. Once Link felt there was a safe distance, he took the opportunity, making his way up the corridor the beast came from. To be certain, Link looked over his shoulder, but in doing so, he did not see the arching twig on the ground, lying before his leading foot. The snap was crisp, especially in the echoing, foggy labyrinth. Link froze. It was too late, though. The creature whipped around, pointing its 10-foot pike straight for the little invader. It charged, growling and snarling as it sprinted forth. In reaction, Link sprinted himself. Down the corridor he and Abby flew, up to a turn in the maze. Link broke in that direction, but his pursuer did not. The brute force of its mass thudding into the mossy stone wall was enough to knock it out. Without wondering whether it was incapacitated, Link continued on. As he made his way through the rest of the labyrinth, he turned to his fairy. What was that, Navi? She said that Ganondorf's evil had been radiating out of the temples, creating a world of monsters, she paraphrased. This maze was once a nice garden to play in, but that was long gone with the invasion of this corruption, a corrosive decay that has ensued since Link's childhood. The Deku Scrubs, Deku Babas, and Skulltulas back in his old village were no doubt subject to this phenomenon, even the Stal children. Link's thoughts were interrupted by an earth-shaking pound, like a boulder smashing into the ground from a rock slide. Link slowly turned the corner in the maze to investigate. Immediately before Link stood another one of those giant leathery creatures, but taller, if it were possible. This one towered 20 feet over Link, and was clad in more impenetrable armor, wielding a 10-foot wooden club the size of a tree. Come to looking at it, it was indeed a tree trunk uprooted by this brute beast, and it was about to come crashing down upon Link. Link felt an impact, but from behind him, taking him swiftly past the giant between his gargantuan legs. After he tumbled over once on the grassy, dew-spotted ground, a hand yanked him up, and he was suddenly sprinting straight down the corridor, the final approach to the place he and Saria once went. When Link safely arrived, he saw to whom the helping hand belonged. It was Sheik, who had swooped in out of nowhere to save Link from being smashed by the tree trunk brandishing monster. Moblins, was all Sheik had to say. Navi came out, fluttering wobbly, but was okay. Together, they looked at the place Link had been headed. It was a small clearing amidst super densely vegetated woods, giving the isolating yet comforting feeling of seclusion. In the center of the grassy lawn was a single tree stump, and an overgrown slab engraved with a pinwheel-like symbol. And to the back was an ancient edifice that was abandoned long ago, and left untouched for centuries, it seemed. The flow of time is always cruel, Sheik said to Link from under his veil. Its speed can be different for each person, but no one can change it. Link walked up to the lonely tree stump, picturing Saria sitting on it, playing her ocarina, the one he still had. A thing that doesn't change with time, Sheik continued, is a memory of younger days. Link recalled something Saria once said to him in that very spot. She said, I feel like this place is sacred. I feel it will be very important for both of us someday. Saria, Link pointed to the weathered building. Is she in there? Is that the forest temple? Sheik began to pace around Link. As you will come to see, Link, a sage must be inside their respective temple in order to be awoken. Yes, this is the forest temple, and yes, I thought Saria to be the likely candidate to become the new sage of forest. She came here, waiting for me to come. The pureness of her heart has allowed her to hear the call well. They both looked over the entrance to the temple. It was a classical architectural style, with a crumbling slate pediment covered in vines, on two fluted columns that came down on either side of a broken stone staircase, which led up to a large rotting oak door. The place always used to give Link the creeps. What was this place? Link asked the Sheik. He had always wondered this as a kid, but because of the broken staircase, which was missing the front portion, he and Saria could never get up to the entrance. Not that they ever wanted to. Sheik looked upon the temple. This forest temple was originally built to honor Furor, the goddess of life and courage. Sheik began to pace again. but its use changed as time wore on. The seclusion, the labyrinth, the single entrance, it was used as a stronghold. A stronghold, Link confirmed. Like a fort? A sanctuary, said Sheik. But a fort isn't too far off. Link, I don't know if you ever knew this, but Hyrule was once ravaged with war. Link gave a quizzical look. The Great Deku Tree never spoke of any war. No doubt he was protecting you Kokiri children. Such perpetually innocent beings have no use for gruesome stories belonging to the past. Link was silent. He began to wonder what else the Great Deku Tree withheld from him to protect him. War is inevitable, said Sheik. My mother taught me that. This particular war was ugly, though. Without getting into the details, I can tell you this much. Was it the Gerudo who fought the kingdom? Link could infer the conflict based on recent events. Gerudo, Hylians, Gorons, Zora, even Sheikah. War is never as simple as us versus them. Another thing my mother taught me. Out of it came the unification under one banner, under the Hylian king. That explains the Zora having their own monarchy, and Darunia mentioning a sworn brotherhood with the king, and Ganondorf. Link thought of Ganondorf's fake Pledge of Allegiance. How recent was this war? It was all over by the time Zelda and I were born. At the end of the war, the Gerudo retreated to their desert territory. There was peace after that, relatively, but they never truly pledged their allegiance to the Hyrule Crest, not until many years later. Ganondorf exploited the king's desire for full unification. It was all coming together for Link, something he never got. Sheik sighed. He displayed hubris in that decision, perhaps, but tensions with the Gerudo had been on the rise. Did Zelda ever tell you about her premonition? Sheik looked right at Link. She did. Sheik began to tear up, and after a pause, stepped back. I'll see you again, Link. With that, he performed the Sheikah disappearing act, slamming a flashbang to the ground. Sheik! Link called out. It was apparent that he upset him, but it was too late. Link turned to the broken staircase that led to the Forest Temple. With all his might, he ran full speed at the wall where the stairs were missing. He ran his way up enough to pull himself to the ledge. The oaken doors were off their hinges a bit, and thus ajar. They creaked as Link pushed them open, in order to enter into the first temple on his new quest.